If I do want to be the traditional housewife, 5 kids, stay at home mom, I'm doing it because I want to do it. Not because I was told that Sky Daddy wants me to do it, or I'm doing it because my mama did it and her mama did it and her mama did it. It is truly what I want to do. It's truly what I want my life to look like unapologetically. And so I think that is the thing, because truly unshackled means do whatever you want, but do it because you want.
I am so excited to present to you today my special guest, Courtney Leak. She is a dynamic therapist and visionary in the world of mental wellness. She excels in helping individuals, couples, groups, and businesses reconnect with their truest selves, navigating them back to their authentic essence. She specializes in complex trauma, including generational trauma and the trauma experienced by marginalized groups. She has over 15 years of experience assisting people to improve their boundaries, relationships, and lives. Courtney's innovative approach incorporates inner child work and self-care, reintroducing joy and play into the lives of her clients. Her experiential methods in guiding people through their personal narratives offer profound insights, fostering clarity and understanding from all angles. Beyond her professional prowess, Courtney embodies diverse roles, such as an empowerment speaker, conscious parent, wellness curator, and accountability aficionado, each reflecting her deep commitment to holistic health and mindful living. There are a few points in the podcast where there are some technical difficulties, so things might look a little special, but hopefully you can bear with it, as I think the conversation is really worth it. She's a beautiful person. Without further ado, Courtney Leak. Today I am here with my special guest, Courtney Leak. I am really excited to chat with you today. I can't remember exactly how I found you, but I have definitely been stalking your Instagram and your webpage and everything. But your Instagram is just full of so much information. And we actually have a lot in common. You might not know that, but it might be revealed as we have our conversation. But yeah, so much to talk about. Where do we start? Tell me like where you're living. I think that's so interesting. Like where you're living. How did you get there? Let's just start with that.
So I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina, and one of those people who mostly lived my life in the same place. I moved
Mm-hmm.
to Charlotte with my mom, I think when I was 1, and then lived in Charlotte, went to school in South Carolina. My family lived in South Carolina. So that was really my area, about a 3-hour radius between North and South Carolina. I always regretted not doing study abroad in college.
Yeah.
And so as I got older, I got more curious about living outside of the United States. But then I got married, I had a kid, and started a business and just settled into life. And then a lot of things started to shift for me at some point. I got divorced. 2016 hit me really hard. And then when 2020 happened, I was in my house working with clients all the time. And I just had this moment of like, oh, my office is where I am. What
Mm-hmm.
if I
Mm-hmm.
go somewhere else? And so I started looking at all the rules and the abilities and like all of the things. And I landed on Panama City, Panama, in part because they have a really good expat community already established. And one of the things I saw for a lot of expats is the loneliness, not being able to create community, especially if you move somewhere where you don't speak the language. And so I wanted, of course, to learn Spanish and also understand that it's hard as an adult to learn a new language. And in that interim, would I have community? And Panama has an amazing expat community. So December, I came for a relocation tour in July of 2022, really asking the ancestors and the guides and everyone to make it plain and clear because I'm doing a big thing and moving my, 10-year-old
It is
year old
big.
out of the country. So I need to know this is right.
Right.
And I just kept getting a hard yes. And the process was seamless, which also felt like a yes. And by December of 22, we were here and we've been here ever since and we love it.
That's amazing. I've actually never been to Panama, but it's definitely on the list. And I'm kind of my mind is is bubbling with ideas. So my story is I am from San Diego, born and raised, but then once I got out of high school, I I wanted to leave. I guess, the grass is always greener somewhere or something. So then I traveled a bunch of places and I ended up doing the digital nomad thing for like 7 years. I was in Mexico City. I was all over. I was in Thailand. I was all over South and Central America, a lot of different places. And I was kind of like always searching for that place that I thought would be the place. And I kind of thought that maybe Mexico City would be that. But then my parents ended up dying and just family stuff. So I came back to San Diego, and then just going back to Mexico City just didn't feel the same. And the irony is that I had spent all these years trying to leave San Diego. And then, like, once my parents passed, now I'm back in San Diego, which is a funny thing. It's like maybe it would have been nicer if I could have been in San Diego while they were more around. But there was just something inside of me that felt like I had to be elsewhere. But it got to a point where I just couldn't travel anymore. And then my sister lives in San Diego. So I came back to San Diego. And the irony is, I came back to San Diego and I actually feel way more stable. I met the love of my life.
Oh,
I'm, like
nice.
things are really progressing. I have 2 doggies now. And, I'm in a PhD program, and being in a stable place has allowed me to actually make a lot more progress because I was trying to travel and do the PhD program at the same time. And that was really tough because I was literally like lugging books with me in my shit. And it was like really hard. So coming back to San Diego has been surprisingly, good for me, but there's this thing in my head like, okay, but where are we going to move to? And I think, I've never been to Panama. Is it Panama? So it's really interesting to hear that you're having a really great experience.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not a romanticized experience. I want to be clear as you see me
Yeah.
sweating right now. It's not romanticized by any means. And I do think had I come younger, I would have romanticized wherever I had
Mm,
landed
yeah,
because it was more of a go away from instead of a go towards.
right.
And this felt like a going towards, which allowed me to go in with my eyes more open and more aware, more humble, but also more clear, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, I think for me, I did it in the right order, which I think is really important for people to hear that your order is your order, your path is your path. And you don't have to do it the same way. It doesn't have to look the same. I think in a world of social media and comparison,
Absolutely.
we're all feeling like we're not doing it right when your path and your order is your order.
As you meet different expats, the community that you're interfacing with, is there anything that is popping up for you that's been really noticeable, like contrasting maybe with the culture that you're used to in the States? Or has there been any surprises, maybe favorable or unfavorable, in your
Mhm.
opinion?
Yeah, it's interesting. In some ways, Panama, the culture is probably like 80s, 90s vibe in some way. It's very Americanized in some ways. The history of Panama is that the US colonized Panama for the canal until 1999. Like they still take
Wow.
the US dollar here. They really push learning English to the children. Yeah, the US owned the canal until 1999. And so there's some things that feel very Americanized, but like what we were doing in the 80s and 90s. So there's a diet culture here that can be really unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a but and also small things like they love the mall. Like the malls in the US
Oh.
are dying. And when I tell you the thing to do in Panama is to go to the mall, they
Oh,
have giant
wow.
malls with like trains in them. They're so big. And
Oh.
so that kind of vibe, still the
Mm-hmm.
the the ideal, the woman desires to stay home and be a stay-at-home mom while the husband goes out and makes the money, and some of those dynamics and things that I feel like we've shifted from in some ways in the US
Mm-hmm.
that are still very much cemented in at least a certain part of the culture in Panama that I think is very interesting. So the thing that I have found interesting is the concept of help, and the concept of community and tribe is different in Panama in a really healthy way. I think like you are expected to, if you have the means, you're expected to pay into the community, whether that is hiring people, whether that is like supporting, and I don't know how to explain it well, but there's just an expectation of how you contribute to the community that I don't think is very American. I think we are a lot more like, if someone is sick, there's no nursing homes here. That's a good example that I use for it. There's no nursing homes here.
Mm,
Somebody is
mm-hmm.
going to take mom in, and whoever takes mom in is expected to be supported by the rest of the family to provide a caregiver, to show up and have lunch with mom, to take the burden off of the person who took mom in. Like, and of course that's not a perfect system, but it is how most people operate here. It's just been a really powerful thing to see around the expectation of community and how it serves each other, and that family expectation that we don't necessarily have with the same dysfunction. With the same dysfunction, with the same stuff, like there's just some things that people don't do here in regards to how they interact with their families.
It sounds like, yeah, the difference between a collectivist society and an individualistic
Exactly.
society. Here, we don't have that sort of leaning on each other as much. It feels like, oh gosh, that might be a burden on me. I can't take care of someone, so we put them in the nursing home. Whereas in collectivist cultures, they all rally together and share the distribution of responsibility to take care of the family
Right.
member.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just implied, which I think in some ways
Hmm.
can be really healthy and beautiful. And, people also stay in toxicity as the same. You know what I mean? They stay in unhealthy marriages, they stay in abusive family dynamics in ways that we don't anymore. So it's again one of those things that the good and bad, but it is that collective society expectation that has felt really interesting and powerful for me, especially as someone who is not particularly close to my family. I have an
Hmm.
amazing and thorough and deep family of choice, but my biological family, I'm not very connected to. And it's challenged me around that, around my level of tolerance and different things that, I should look at with me around, do people owe me this super healthy, perfect version of themselves in order to be in relationship? Or do
Mm.
I need to learn how to have some different boundaries where I can right size with them that doesn't always involve complete disconnection?
Sounds like some amazing challenges and lessons that are coming up for you living in Panama.
For sure, for sure. Yeah.
Something I wanted to ask you about is your blog, The Unshackled
Hmm.
Life, of which I absolutely love the name of it because The Unshackled Life is just a brilliant, a brilliant name. One of my top five, I'd say, values in my life is
Mm,
freedom. And so that really resonates with me because it just feels like just having freedom to travel to, I guess, the individualistic American in me is like that feels like an important part of what I want to maintain in my life. I never chose to have kids. I purposely was like, I never want children. And it wasn't until, like I told you recently, moving to San Diego that I even had
mm,
pets,
mhm.
because I was like, dang, I can barely even take care of myself. How can I even take care of a pet? I didn't even want the responsibility of taking care of a pet. In the Unshackled Life, it seems like you tackle a lot of really important and interesting topics that we can dive into. I've got some notes here, but I'd just like to hear, like, yeah, can you tell me more about the Unshackled Life and how did that name came to be?
It came from, I was trying to really expand my brand. And, the question always comes up around, what's your niche? What's your niche? What's your niche? Which pisses me off. Like, I just am someone I feel very eclectic. Like, even when I worked in community mental health, my favorite caseload was when I had the bitchy teenager, the little 5-year old that couldn't sit still, and the 10-year old that was trying to figure out life. Like, I just love variety. And when you look at the clients I work with now, it's still a variety. And so when I think about niche, it always is like, don't box me in. And so, talking with
Mm,
this brand
mm-hmm.
manager, I was like, my niche is helping people live a life unshackled by expectations, by constructs, by belief systems, by anything that is keeping them from being free in their choices. And that just kind of became the thing, like this concept of living unshackled and being okay with however you live, but letting it be unshackled. So if I do want to be the traditional housewife, 5 kids, stay at home mom, like very traditional, whatever, I'm doing it because I want to do it. Not because I was told that Sky Daddy wants me to do it, or I'm doing it because my mama did it and her mama did it and her mama did it. It is truly what I
Mm-hmm.
want to do. It's truly what I want my life to look like unapologetically. And so I think that is the thing, because truly unshackled means do whatever you want, but do it because you want. And so that has really been this journey that I've been on personally and part of how I really work with my clients.
That just resonates so much. My actual mission statement is to that effect as well, as like helping women break through their patterns of compulsive binge eating so that they can live a life of their
Mhm.
choosing. And again, it's implying basically you have a choice. You can make that choice, and it could be huge goals. It could be just little things. Hey, I like to just chill at the house and read my book. And that's great too. But the whole point is not being stuck in something that feels like you're a victim or it's beyond you and you're just in a compulsive pattern, but to be free and choose to live how you want to live.
Exactly, exactly. And I think to begin, I have to figure out who I am, what I love, what feeds my soul, what makes me angry, what makes me sad, what makes me laugh till I cry and maybe pee a little. Like I've really got to experience myself in order to know who I am and the life that I want. And so many of us are told who to be. We're told how to look, we're told how to believe, we're told how to love, we're told so many things while our brains are still forming. And we get into our adulthood and we're like, I don't know who I am. One of the saddest things I have found is when I have clients who are in their 60s and 70s and they say to me, Courtney, I don't know who I am. And I'm like, wow, like I don't say this to them, but like you've been here a really long
Right.
time and you haven't gotten to learn who you are. How sad. How do we start that right now? How do we clear away anything that's in your way of that and start that right now? Because how do I do anything else well if I don't get to know who I am?
Everything you're saying is just so moving and just resonates so much. So, someone who is inspired by your words and was like, oh my gosh, I want to figure out who I am and I want to feel those highs and those lows and I want to feel that joy and I want to feel that anger, but they don't know how to dip their toes in that. They might not know, they might feel numb or, do you have any advice for someone on how to start to figure out who they are?
Interestingly enough, that advice is do less and sit more. Sit more with yourself. There's so much information in our bodies, and we come from a world, especially now with the technology age that we're in, where it's so go, 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 quick, 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 no pause, no rest. We'll sleep when we're dead, is the mentality. And what I have found is the more I get to know Courtney, the less I do. When I'm in my workaholism, when I'm in my super mom got to be perfect, when I'm in my anything, I am not listening to Courtney. And so one of the things I started doing is doing less in the morning, waking up slowly and like just cutting on my music and laying there for a second, listening, checking in on my body from the soles of my feet to the crown chakra of my head, and just taking in all the information, taking in a breath and asking myself, did that breath flow with ease or did that breath get constricted? And if so, where? And what might that mean? Taking a moment and pausing before saying yes or no and sitting with the answer. Someone saying, "Hey, Courtney, do you want to do this thing?" I try to pause and be like, "Do you, Courtney? Do you really want to do it? Can you do it? And do you want to?" So that then I can really answer, because a lot of us answer out of, yeah, I'm supposed to say yes. You're my friend, you're my parent, you're my whoever. You ask me something, I'm supposed to say yes. But then we have all this resentment and frustration, and we're like, oh, why do I have this energy with them? It's because you don't pause to answer, do I really want to do this? I also think taking time and going backwards, looking at old pictures of yourself, asking yourself, who was that person? What did they believe about love, life, who they were, what the world was? How did that shape? What did they need? Because that person still needs it. Whatever age that is, that part of you is still in there waiting for that need to be met. And how do I get clear around how I got here and what I might need to release or to gain in order to move forward?
We had a little bit of technical difficulties. So if we look a little bit different, it's because it's a different day, but we're doing our best here. Last time we were talking about mindfulness, and kind of my perception of the conversation was informal practices versus formal mindfulness practices, and I was really resonating with what you were saying. um like what's the point necessarily of being in a static pose, having a designated mindfulness practice? The rest of your day you're just going to be stuck scrolling on your phone going a million miles per hour. The point of mindfulness is kind of to be able to have mindfulness in your day. So that time might be well suited to just kind of slow down in your day and be able to pay attention to what you're doing and have a little bit more presence in your body. I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about that subject, if you have any favorite practices or anything else you want to share about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for me, I definitely came into mindfulness as like a meditator, as, friends being like, oh, you should try meditation. And I would do the 30 minutes or the hour even of like guided meditations. Those felt really good. And then I would feel it like edging off like throughout the day. And I was like, how do I keep it? And then through time, I recognized, oh, I have to be mindful throughout my day, which at this point now, normally my meditations are 15 minutes, but I'm very mindful throughout my day. And so trying to do one thing at a time in a world where we're always supposed to be listening to something or watching something or doing something, but doing one thing at a time and really paying attention with all of your senses to what you are doing. When I make my tea, what does the kettle feel like in my hand? What does the sound of the water bubbling in the kettle sound like? What are the smells? What's it like to stir my tea? Being very present, because what we know is it's those actions throughout your day that really keep you in your window of tolerance, that really keep you in your mindful state, which helps you make all the decisions you need to make. It helps you to be present with the people in your life. It helps you to connect with those and really hear someone. So when someone is talking to me, I'm very much like, I am listening to the person talking to me. I am very focused on that. I don't put my phone on a ringer for that reason, because I can't control who's texting and calling when. I can control when it gets my attention. So I often am on do not disturb and I'm often on vibrate, so that people understand that I will get to you when I get to you, but I will not be beholden to this little box that I've paid a bunch of money for. And I really want to be present with the people that I am connecting to and listening to. My first practice with this was washing my hands. I really started when I would have hard sessions with clients, I would feel this like, ooh, I want to wash my hands, almost like energetically cleanse the space. And so I started just very intentional, like washing my hands, but also, what am I pulling into this? Like, is it stress? Is it anxiety? Is it fear? Is it worry? Because oftentimes I would be worried about the client, as they're leaving in this situation, whatever it may be. How do I wrap that up into this soap in my hands and then let the water rinse that away and really watch it rinse away so that I can have the space for the next client or for my son or for my friends or for my partner, whomever I'm interacting with next. So that's kind of where I started the practice of just every time I wash my hands. And I'm someone who likes a podcast. I like music, kind of those background noises. But when I'm washing my hands, I'm cutting it off and taking a moment to be with myself in this process. And once I saw the benefit of that, I was like, well, what about if I try it with this? And what about? And so then it was tea or any time of preparation kind of thing. I want to try to be mindful. So cooking, making my coffee, making my tea, those kind of things. Then it moved into that. Then it was walking and just what does it mean to walk, not in silence, because I'm getting the energy and the sounds of the space, but what does it mean to be fully oriented in just this space? So there's a beautiful trail along the water in Panama called the Cinta Costera. And when I walk that, I try to walk it very intentionally. What does it feel like for my heel to be on the ground and my toes to be up? And the curve of my feet, heel, toe, heel, toe. What does it sound like? What do my steps sound like when I have on my Air Maxes or when I have on my flip flops? What sounds can I hear? Can I hear the car horns and the birds and what all can I see? You know what I mean? The different people and experiences and the person making the shaved ice and the guy dancing on the corner for money. Like, I really want to be in my space, fully in my body. And I can't do that when I'm listening to the music or listening to the podcast because I'm now sectioned. My attention is in sections. And so, really challenging myself to just be with myself alone in an experience and not need a distraction from me. It has been such a it's made such a huge difference in my life.
Everything that you're saying is so powerful and just so rebellious for the society that we live in that's trying to get us to do a million things, but just to be like, let's just be with this one thing and engage with our senses and just be present for this one thing, like to be with a cup of tea or to just wash our hands is just such an unconventional perspective in these times. And if you saw me like going like this, it's not my makeup. It's like I'm crying, because it's just
Mm,
like resonating so much.
yeah,
Like I feel like these are your words are things that just they're in here for me. And also just the language that you use is very somatically oriented. My background is somatic psychology, so I really appreciate the way that you call attention to, the sensory experience of walking and how does the foot go? How does it get placed upon the ground? If you're walking, there's all these different senses that we can survey. What are the things that we can see? What are the things that we can hear? Sometimes when I walk, I do a lot of the same practices that you do. And I'll be like, what are five things that I can see? What are five things that I can feel? And I'll be like, okay, I can feel my sweater. I can feel the temperature. I can feel the breeze on my cheek. I can feel like a tightness in my back or, just kind of list the feelings. And then I'll try to also sometimes if I'm feeling tricky, I'll even try to go like in the beyond the near senses, but kind of like, oh, like what's going on with my vestibular sense or like,
yeah, for
what's going
sure.
on with like, emotions, not necessarily just like a sensation, but what's my emotions or, just trying to kind of taking a scan, kind of heightening myself with all that's going on, whether it's interoceptively or it's my vision or what it is that I'm hearing, but just kind of getting in the habit of being in touch with myself, especially those of us who have a history of dissociation and addictions, compulsions, impulsivity. I think it's a good habit to kind of just check and be like, hey, hold on a second. What is here? What's with me? What's in my space?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that so many of us learned at different times in life that being in here was unsafe. So many of us have messages that we weren't safe. In some way, shape, or form, we were taught that we were not safe. And because normally that happens when we're children, Children make things about themselves that are not about themselves because it is too scary for it to be about the adults. The people who are supposed to keep me alive for better or for worse, I really need them to be safe. And so if there is unsafety, it must be my fault. It must be something I'm doing. It must be something that I'm missing or some way that I'm being too much or too little. And so we just stop trusting ourselves very young. And what you and I know is that most of our information is in here. And so if I don't trust me and I don't think I'm safe, then I'm not listening to me. And therefore, I'm not able to protect me. And therefore, then I'm not safe. And then it gets reinforced in society. And when I've worked with couples or clients or families to get back in their bodies, the clarity, the transparency, the boundaries, the healthiness that can come from just being safely inside myself. Sometimes that's all the work they need. Because then I'm able to communicate it. I'm able to hold my line. I'm able to be honest. And a healthy relationship can hold that. And so that has been one of those things where when I work with clients, I'm like, we got to slow down and get you in your body. So many people want to process it and talk about it in their head. And I'm like, we can do that. But until you are back in your body, none of that's going to stick for real. Until you can tolerate being with you for any period of time, any of this information, the psychoeducation isn't going to stick. And so, what I really want people to hear is that this mindfulness, because I think so many things get popularized and then diminished or minimized. This mindfulness thing that you and I are talking about is life changing. You know what I mean? This is not the Instagram mindfulness. This is not the TikTok mindfulness. This is feeling safe in your body and then gathering information about yourself and your environment because you feel safe in your body. And that is transformative.
Absolutely. And I think for the people who learned from a young age that it could be scary to be in their body, people who suffered a lot of trauma when they were younger, the informal mindfulness moments is perfect for them because sometimes, trying to get them into these deep practices is really not appropriate and can cause further harm. But just having them just stand while they're washing dishes and just say, hey, can you pay attention to what the water is feeling like on your skin? Do you notice the warmth of it? What does the soap feel like? Does it feel pleasant, unpleasant, neutral? What else is going on in the experience? If you can just kind of get curious and be present with that little thing, it can have real ripples in other ways, but it doesn't have to be like a scary practice that sometimes these formal mindfulness practices have.
Absolutely. And I agree. I think a lot of people are very averse to mindfulness because they were introduced to it past their, like already past their window of tolerance. And so, of course, the first time they do it or the second time, they freak the hell out, which is appropriate. Your body is saying not yet too much, but then they feel
Yeah.
shame for freaking out and they're like, oh, it doesn't work. So then they either blame themselves or blame the modality and then don't try the mindfulness again. And I think that is the saddest thing because the concept is good. It was just that practice you're not ready for. And that's okay.
One of the things that you have mentioned that you're passionate about is healers and their healing work. And I'm wondering if you could speak more on that.
A couple of things come up. I very early recognized the power of being in, like, being the person a vulnerable person is listening to. Being the person that when someone is vulnerable, I'm the one whose ear, I have their ear. I am giving suggestions, I am giving support to this vulnerable person. And if I'm not well, if I am not in a good space, then that is going to taint the work that I'm doing. Like I just had that clarity kind of coming into the field. Like in my master's program, I started sitting with that. And I even said at some point, like, so when do we start doing our therapy? And I was like, because I'm already in therapy, so I just need to know, like, do I need to get my therapist to sign off and blah, blah, blah. And they were like, oh, we don't do that. And I was like, I don't know why don't we do that? When are we gonna do that? How do you know I'm not crazy? I think that
Right.
was my like how do you know, person who's about to give me a degree, that I am not completely unwell? How do you know? Oh, you don't? Oh, and you're just gonna give me the degree anyway because I got the A? Gotcha. Okay, well, that's interesting. And then I'm somebody who really likes confirmation. And so one of my ask of the universe is like, show it to me so that I know that it's real. Like I like to see it in more than one thing. And I get that in good things and not good things. And one of the things that I have experienced as a therapist is I've had several clients who were in unhealthy sexual relationships with their previous therapist. And, in school, they're like, don't sleep with your client. And everybody's like, what? That's crazy. Who's doing that? Blah, 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 blah. I have met the people who have been mishandled and abused by their therapist. And the saddest thing for me in that is those people then took years away from therapy. So they came into therapy with already something that they needed healing around. And then what they got instead was abuse, and then from there, they then weren't safe in therapy. So then they didn't get any more healing. And on top of that, had a new compound abuse and trauma to sit with. It is just something that I just feel very, very, very passionate about, because what we have been called into is precious and it is sacred, and people need the support and the help. And I need to be able to hold space without entering into that space, without letting their stuff. Because the other thing I realized as a therapist pretty early is different versions of you are who are going to come sit across from you on your couch.
Mm.
The me that wasn't ready to leave my marriage, I've had her sit across from me on my couch more times than I can name. The me that was afraid I'm not doing a good job as a mom has sat across from me on the couch more times than I can name. The me who has deep mother issues and is still trying to hustle her worthiness for her mama, sitting across from me more times than I can name. And if I'm not on my shit, I can get real invested into yours. And so, yes, I've seen extreme examples of people crossing lines into abuse, but I've seen coercion, I've seen pressuring, I've seen therapists become completely undone and the client then having to take care of them.
Wow.
There are a lot of things when I'm not taking care of me and prioritizing me, I am going to start to leak out, and I am not going to be able to manage the leaking that I do. It is going to spill everywhere, even in my career, especially. And because therapy and a lot of these coaching therapy, these practices tend to be one on one. Just like you and I sitting here, there is nobody standing behind me making sure I don't say anything harmful to you.
Well, it has been such a pleasure to have you here. If people want to follow you, go on your website, find out about new things, like what is the best way to be in your sphere?
Yeah, I always post on Instagram, which is at Haven Wellness PLLC, the name of my company. And then my website is the same, www.havenwellnesspllc.com. So those are the two places that have most of my information. I try to always keep those up to date. I do have a Facebook as well, but the only time it's updated is when it's connected to Instagram. So
Okay.
you can definitely go there, but Instagram and my website are probably your best two options.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. It has been such an intense, enjoyable, wonderful, amazing pleasure to have you. And I just really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.